You're pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people, they lynched people, they raped people, they enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. And so don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them. For God's sake, you want to do racist stereotypes? If it fit anywhere, and it doesn't, but if it fit anywhere, it would certainly fit white right-wingers in the South, who has hundreds of years of history of being savages. Savages.
Everything he said on that video is the truth. Now he's talking about, the wickedness, I don't know if I say wickedness is like an understatement of what was meted upon the blacks, right, in the days of slavery. And I don't know, for some reason, I think this particular video was trending today, and I'm like, well, let me bring it here, let's talk about it. And then several more videos about people talking about the white supremacy and everything, right? And then we're going to come back and we'll analyze everything that, we've heard. And I would also like to see your suggestion. Do not forget to subscribe, like, share those videos, right? Turn on your notification buttons so you can be getting stories like this. Come back and watch the commentary.
White people, why is it that y'all don't like hearing about all the horrific things white people did during slavery and after slavery? Does it make you feel some sort of way? I just want to know.
All right, so in 1860, I want you to guess how many white individuals owned slaves. Like what percentage of white people in the US owned slaves? I'll give you 5 seconds. Across the entire white population in the US in 1860, 1.4% of individuals owned slaves. And I find this interesting because I rarely hear anybody talk about this. In other words, 98.5 to 98.6 out of every 100 white people did not own slaves. So my question to many black Americans is, why do we continue to act like it was 100% of white people who own slaves and all white people are responsible for it? Like you'll see many black Americans that love to talk about this history and get all, and they don't want to tell you this and they don't want to tell you that, but these same people conveniently leave out that the vast majority of white people did not have slaves. On top of that, many black Americans act like there was not a civil war fought over slavery. The Civil War was fought over slavery, and over 300,000 male white Union soldiers died in this war. So in essence, there were whites who were fighting to keep us enslaved, and there were whites who were fighting to free us. But it seems like most black Americans only tend to want to focus on the white Americans who wanted to enslave us, and they treat all white Americans as if they're part of that group, when the reality is, clearly, they're not and they weren't. Again, only like 1.4 to 1.5% of white individuals in 1860 owned slaves. So again, my 2 questions as of right now would be, why are we acting like all white people owned slaves and supported people owning slaves? And the other question is, why do we act as if there was not a civil war fought by white people to free us from being slaves? It's like many of us only want to focus on the side that was doing wrong and not the side that did right. And I think this is important clarity that's not talked about enough. Like too many of us walk around acting like this was something all white people were doing. It wasn't. So acting like this was all white people is representing a skewed, inaccurate version of history. And many black Americans somewhat base some of their feelings of white people based off of this skewed, inaccurate representation of history. And I think the more we can bring to light the reality of this can work to help alleviate some of the frustration that black Americans have with white people, which I think overall would be beneficial. But then the next thing on top of this is it's about time to move on. Like at some point, we have to move on. Like if many black people spent more time focused on bettering themselves and putting themselves in a better situation compared to talking about racism and white people and complaining about the past, many of us would be far better off. That's just the truth. A lot of that mental energy could go to something much more productive for you and your family and society as a whole. Also, just a reminder, I have a free email newsletter where I go into more detail on many of the topics that I talk about. I cover many things here the mainstream media does not want to cover. Also, like in this video, I show a lot of facts that are inconvenient to the narratives that people want to push. So the link to this is in my bio. Just go to my profile, click the link. You'll see the screen I just showed. Drop your email and hit subscribe and you'll be good to go. That's all I got for now. We'll see you in the next one.
The fact that this white man had the audacity to say that the British people weren't immigrants when they came to Australia. This is our land.
It is our land, though. We created Australia. We are Australians. That continent is ours. And the only people who want to tell us that it's stolen land and that it doesn't belong to us are people who want to take it from us. And along that same ulterior motive of wanting to steal the country from us is this argument that we're all immigrants, that the first Australian pioneers who were British and built the country from literally dirt and bush into a first world country, that they are somehow the same as the immigrants who rock up today to our post-industrial aging society, is a non sequitur. The only reason these arguments of it being stolen land and everyone's just immigrants, the reason they are employed is to help to debase and destroy the Australian identity, such as to culturally disarm us so we don't feel like we're actually losing anything, as we are literally losing our country and her national inheritance, which our ancestors bequeathed to us. So Australians need to learn to recognize this threat. When someone tells you something isn't yours, particularly your actual country, they're planning to take it from you.
Oh, it's like you can't even say you're proud of being white anymore. Yup, because that's weird and tasteless. And I just think that's a weird thing to say, okay? It is very different if you say I'm proud of being Belgian or Swedish or Dutch or whatever country your ancestors are from. That's fine. You're associating with a particular culture. I see no problem with that, right? But it is also very different to say you're proud of being white than it is to say you're proud of being gay or black or trans or Asian or Jewish or whatever, right? Because those are all oppressed groups in this country, right? These are groups that fight daily for recognition. And so when you say you're proud of being part of one of them, that is an act of resistance, right? That is fighting the power. When you say you're proud of being white, you are, if anything, reinforcing the power and kind of weirdly flexing your privilege, right? It's fine to think that, right? You can think, oh boy, do I love being white, because obviously you get a fuck ton of privilege. Why did you feel the need to say it? Why do you so badly want to say it to everyone? That is the question, right? There's nothing inherently wrong, per se, with saying you like being white, right? There's nothing terribly racist about that sentence on its own, but you add the historical context of everyone who ever says that being a Nazi or a white supremacist, and then you add that to the fact that we all know you like being white because you get a lot of fucking privilege. It's like, it just reads weird, you know? If you had a reason, if you're like, I love being white because I fuck with casserole, you know? I'd be like, okay, this guy just loves casserole and that's why he loves white culture. Sure. But that's not why you're saying it, right? Because the people that are going around with feeling the need to say they love being white, are always racist. They're always racist. And it's not because they love being white, it's because they're just fucking racist. You know, so it's just, I don't know why you feel the need to fucking say that to people. What is your end game? What are you trying to get out of that? What conversation starts with, guys, I'm just proud of being white? Everyone goes, okay, man, sure, dude.
I am trying to get real with myself and with other white people, and it is painful work. There's a whole lot of blame toward black people for being the cause of how white people treat them, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. I decided to take a closer look at slavery, since that's such a big topic in the United States. There has been slavery all over the world forever, and all colors of people have enslaved other colors of people for as long as we know about. But the transatlantic slave trade, in which Europeans brought African and Caribbean black people to the United States to be free labor in the new colonies before they were really the United States, is a whole different story of slavery. Slavery historically had to do with who won and who lost a war, who was convenient, who stumbled by at the wrong time, and so it wasn't specifically race-based. So why did these white Europeans choose black people to enslave? Because their physical differences from whites made it easier to create lies that they were biologically inferior. They invented science to defend this. It was easier to make these people who looked so different from us less human. And that lie made it easier to justify torture, rape, family separation, and death on a massive scale. And it made them, quite frankly, easier to identify if they tried to escape. The legacy didn't disappear when slavery ended. Eugenics came along and fed the racial superiority notion of whiteness, and it influenced the Nazi narrative along with the racial one. It carried over into segregation, Jim Crow, housing, policing, incarceration, education, all of that. if we're ever going to fix what's broken, we need to get curious enough to name how it got broken in the first place. White people need to get curious so we can say no more, not on my watch.
Hey everybody, Professor Moore here. So the other day I was watching the video of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk debating 25 liberal college students, and one scene in particular really stood out to me. So in the scene, a student is discussing the racist violence that Black Americans faced for over a century in this country, and she points out how from the 1860s until the 1960s, 4,000 Black men, women, and children were lynched. Now, I think that it is so important that she's bringing lynching into the conversation because it is a critical topic to focus on if you really want to know the true history of the United States. However, the number of African Americans that were lynched in this country is far greater than 4,000. For many years, the best data that we had on lynching came from the Equal Justice Initiative. And in 2015, they released a study that found evidence for 4,400 lynchings of African Americans. However, in 2020, the Equal Justice Initiative released a new report that found evidence of an additional 2,000 lynchings, bringing the current number up to 6,500 lynchings of African Americans in this country. But even the number of 6,500 lynchings is probably still too low. And I guarantee that as more research is done, that number is going to continue to rise. And it's probably going to get closer to the estimate given by anti-lynching activist Ida B. Wells, who said that there was probably 10,000 lynchings of African Americans that occurred. However, even 10,000 might be a low estimate when we add in the number of African Americans that were killed in what were described as race riots. You might be familiar with the 1921 Tulsa Massacre, in which hundreds of African Americans were killed by their white neighbors in Oklahoma. When I was doing research on lynching, I came across thousands of accounts of lynchings in historical newspaper databases. But another thing that I came across over and over again were these accounts of massacres that were the killing of not just individuals, but dozens and even hundreds of African Americans. Here's an example of a headline that I came across from 1873, which reads, "The War of Races. Nearly 300 Negroes burned to death by whites in Louisiana. A horrible affair." Now, can you imagine how much that number of 6,500 or 10,000 would grow if we add in all of these episodes of race riots and massacres that killed hundreds of people across the country? We'll probably never know the true number of African Americans that were killed through lynching or white supremacist violence because so many of these stories have left no trace at all in the historical record. For example, in Margaret Burnham's recent book by hands now known, Jim Crow's Legal Executioners, she begins by telling the story of Ollie Hunter. Ollie Hunter was a Black woman in her 60s that was living in Georgia. And in 1944, she went to a general store. And while she was in the store, she picked up a can of oil. The white male owner of the store screamed at her to put down the can of oil, which she did, and then she walked out of the door. As she left the store, the owner came up behind her and brutally beat her to death with an axe. Now, in the book, Burnham notes that we would have never known about this murder if it wasn't for a single letter that an individual sent to the NAACP complaining about how the man who committed this murder was never charged with the crime. And it wasn't until 2020 when researchers finally recovered the name of Ollie Hunter and brought her story back into the light. Can you imagine how many more Ollie Hunters are out there? How many more stories of white supremacist violence that are untold and waiting to come into the light? That's why I always say the true number of lynchings will never be known. But even if we ever did come to an accurate number of how many African Americans were lynched in this country, that number will never be able to reflect the reality and the horror of living in a society that allowed this type of violence to happen.
When white people see my posts about racism in America, frequently they say, I didn't know. When black people see these comments, they say, we already know. There is no way you didn't know. Don't pretend you didn't. This disconnect is really hard to explain, and I've been trying to understand it myself. I'm going to be digging into this really deep because I think it's so important. It's not that we're just oblivious white people. It's that we've been groomed to be oblivious white people. People point out that it's not like this stuff is locked in some vault somewhere. It's available. You can see it. And that's true. But we were trained not to ask questions. We were trained not to look for it. And I see it in my family. I see it in my circle of friends, even some of my friends that are pretty progressive. We have this ingrained training to not ask too many questions. We were taught to trust authority figures, teachers, ministers, police officers, politicians, the anchor guy on the evening news. We believed them because we were groomed from childhood to believe that they were trustworthy. We were not taught that the system itself, the system they were part of, was designed to protect itself first. And frankly, it felt good just to trust them. It's like you had this permanent mommy and daddy figure. It made life feel safe. The gaps in white knowledge were filled in with lies. We were told that poor people were lazy, that's why they're poor. That crime existed in black neighborhoods because they were black neighborhoods. That broken families cause poverty. These ideas were not questioned. They were treated as common sense. And we were started with our grooming as infants, as little tiny babies, as little bitty kids that are impressionable and just forming our ideas about the world. So that was our social foundation. We were told that black people can't keep their marriages together. I was even told that the reason they couldn't keep their marriages together was because of how they were treated during slavery. So out of one side of their mouth, they'd say, wasn't that horrible that families were split up during slavery? But now that has just become part of who they are. And so it's their fault. I don't know, it didn't make sense to me either. We also were not told that welfare benefits were not available if there was a man in the house, a black woman working 2 jobs who still needed support to raise her children, could not have a husband or partner living in the house with her. And of course we were taught that that was their fault because they couldn't keep their marriages together. As we were growing up and we started to repeat these beliefs, we were seen as respectful and well-adjusted. I don't know, are you getting pissed off? I'm getting pissed off just going through this again. We were guided by the TV news and movies and TV shows to care when white people suffered and to disconnect from the pain of other people. We were taught to feel patriotic about our country without questioning whether they were being truthful with us about why we should feel such patriotism. When we asked those white authority figures that we were taught to trust, we were lied to. Now, when black people give us honest answers, we don't fully trust them. It's not about ignorance. It's about conditioning. My education is in behavior analysis, and that's how that works. You just expose someone to a social system that supports a certain line of thinking, and you fall for it, especially if you are started out as a young kid being taught all that stuff. And that's what happens to all of us. We were taught that silence is polite and that truth about society is rude or inappropriate. And as a girl that went to a fundamentalist Christian church, that was even more so. You don't ask questions that are going to make people uncomfortable. But that comfort, you see, it kept us obedient. It kept us from asking too many questions. It kept us from wanting to do anything about it because we didn't fully understand that there was something that needed to be done. We were used to preserve a system that depended on our own silence. It kept us from befriending black people. It kept us from knowing what the hell we thought we knew about those people. So When white people say, I didn't know about any of this, understand what that really means. We were trained not to look. We were trained to believe the stories that we were told by the authority figures. We were shaped by a system that used your trust against you. We were trained to look away. And now we have a choice. White people, we need to get angry about being kept in the dark all these years so that together with our black neighbors and neighbors of all races, we can break down this oppressive system that has brought us here to the point of fascism. Check the caption for some documentaries to help you get started learning. We need to really get curious.
And I can tell you, Art, as a certified school psychologist who works in schools, when white children bully black children, nothing is done about it. Let me say that again. I'm talking California to Pennsylvania. I'm talking Texas to Connecticut and everywhere in between. When white kids bully black kids, nothing is done about it. There is a white privilege in America's public schools. There's a white privilege in America's charter schools. There's a white privilege in America's independent schools. For all we know, and I'm not going to put this on them, but for all we know, Hunter and Austin could have a history of bullying black kids. And it finally caught up to them. And I don't say that to be insensitive, but white kids, just like white people, feel as though they have jurisdiction over the black body. And thanks to Carmelo Anthony, they will all have to think twice about that now.
This regime hates black people and immigrants and other marginalized groups. I was in the garden this morning and was thinking about what is going on in DC, what has happened in LA, and what they are promising for Chicago and Detroit and many other majority minority areas. And I was like, man, they really do hate black people. They hate immigrants like it's so obvious. And then I started thinking about history and what history has taught us. If you are willing to learn, this nation was built on hatred, on the dehumanization of enslaved Africans, on the pillaging and genocide of Native Americans. It was built into the very foundation of this country's founding. And understanding that, understanding what history teaches us, when you start looking at the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we didn't get fair housing until like 1968. I am the first generation in my family who was born with all of their rights. My mother was born in 1960. Her mother was the daughter of sharecroppers. Her grandparents were enslaved. And thinking about where Black Americans have made it to in one generation. In one generation, we have had a Black president of the United States. We've had a female Black vice president. We have elected members of Congress that are representative of minorities, minority ethnic groups, minority religions, and to see the progress that has happened in one generation after hundreds of years, centuries of oppression and Jim Crow and segregation. Those same people who fought against integration, those same people who fought against busing, the same people who sold their houses and escaped integrated areas, they're not gone. Those same people are still alive. They are alive and they remember the whites only fountains. They remember when their children received the superior education and Black children received the crumbs. They remember when schools were integrated. They remember the National Guard coming in. They remember people like James Meredith, who integrated Ole Miss here in Mississippi, because it was in this lifetime. They remember when civil rights leaders were arrested here in Rankin County. They remember all of the atrocities. They remember crosses burning. They remember Medgar Evers' death. And they also with that firsthand account, with that knowledge of their inherent superiority, the complex that they see themselves, they also see the progress that Black people here in America have made. Their hatred didn't die. It has only intensified. So, of course, this regime hates Black people and immigrants. Not because we are inferior, but because in one generation, we have managed to accomplish that which took them hundreds of years. Because we are educated and CEOs, we are business owners and teachers, administrators, nurses, doctors. We are pushing against the status quo. We are providing education regarding the treatment of Black Americans. We are highlighting the disparities in health outcomes. We are pushing back. And for people who remember drinking out of Whyt's only fountains, seeing that the same people that they sought to keep their foot on, that they tried to keep ostracized, those same people have given birth to an entirely different generation. A generation that is not asking, but is demanding. They are not waiting. They are kicking down doors. And when I think about George W. Bush and how the answer to him was Barack Hussein Obama, this nation's first Black president, who ran on a message of hope, who pulled us out of the greatest economic catastrophe that this nation has known since the Great Depression. The antithesis of Barack Hussein Obama was 45. And after he messed everything up, we ushered in sanity. Joe Biden. But of course, this nation does not like progress, not at a consistent level. So we turned 45 into 47. And the answer to him will be the left's 47, whomever that may be. Because there will be an answer. There will be a response. Because this nation, this regime, they harbor an unjustified hatred towards Black people. The progress that Black people have made in one generation. Imagine what we could do if we were just left alone. Imagine what we could do if there were not laws to govern every aspect of our lives. Yeah, that's why they hate us.
Honestly, this is what I have to say after all the rantings going on. These rantings are what's trending, right? I decided, okay, let me bring it to you guys on this platform and we could actually talk about it. I watched this video and it took me a whole lot of time of meditation. Honestly, I cried. I saw the injustice that was meted upon my own fellow people of, now, let's not even talk about my people of my own color, right? Now, I'm talking about a human being treated this way. There are women being, RAPED, SAs, so many kind of things, the harsh condition they were during the slavery. And I'm like, how do you guys manage to actually come out of these things and start doing exploit? Because so many Black Americans are doing very, very well. I won't lie. A lot of them are millionaires, billionaires, and dollars. How do you all survive this trauma that happened to your ancestors? And you're here again, you're fighting, you're doing everything possible, and you're keeping it together. How? And it hasn't stopped. We're talking about the police brutality. It didn't stop everywhere. Now, we're not just talking about America. We're talking about even Australia and every other place that have Blacks, right? They have the stories to talk about, slavery, this, that. And then what keep getting on my nerves about this whole thing is how the whites actually are proud to be slave masters. They're actually proud that their own parents, their ancestors were slave masters. Imagine you as a white person You come up, or as a human being, come up to find out that, oh, your own father or your grandparents were part of people that meted a whole lot of, would I say, disdain, hatred, my God, anguish and whatever on a human being. How would you cope with it? How would you live with that? For me, it's painful. Those people that did those things are wicked. They are bad people. How could they? And it's still what keeps baffling me when I see, people talk down on Black Americans. I'm like, how would you talk back at these people? Talk down on them. Do you know what they've been through? These people have suffered marginalization in that country. Imagine having swimming pools and you said, oh, their kids don't swim in your swimming pools. Imagine in the cities they stay, not having good schools. They just see few schools and their government-owned schools. Everything, they don't do everything like the ones of the other people. Imagine growing up in such kind of a place. Imagine the trauma it leaves here. It's like forever, right? It's forever thing. Not like it's forever. It will live with them for the rest of their lives, right? So, and that's why most times when they flare up, when they feel like, oh, they're screaming, I'm just quiet. And I expect a lot of people to be quiet because these people have gone through a whole lot. Some of them have seen their parents actually go through these things. Some of them were in the frontiers. They were soldiers, treated badly. And a lot of people are now saying, oh, they didn't go to school. They are illiterate. They are not hardworking. Do you know what it means? Sit down and think about it. Think about it. You sit down and you watch a place where your own father is being treated like, I don't know what to call it. It's out of this world. But think with... I don't want to get emotional, but I want to see your own, I want to see if you've actually experienced it or you have a first-hand story in the comments. I would like you to actually share. I keep saying it, I'm big on Blacks, right? All over the world. Black Americans, number one. You understand? I feel their pains. That's why I don't support when people, all this whole stuff they do with, the FAAs and all of that. Because I know what it takes. You understand? So I think I should stop here so that in the next videos I'm going to bring, I can actually say things. Because the more I keep saying this, the more I'm emotional. Look how my eyes are already teary, right? That is just it. So if you have not subscribed, go ahead, subscribe, like, share, right, this video, and turn on your notification buttons because I do content like this that will keep you glued to the screen and know what's trending. See you in the next one. Bye.